So today's topic is Wi-Fi isn't your rotisserie chicken because we don't set it and forget it. And with that, I'm going to hand this off to my trusty host, because I am your sidekick, Stu, from Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm going to hand it off to my host, Tawny. And Tawny, why don't you take it away?
But first, to answer a question, Ryan, yes, I've already had my Dr. Pepper today, so I appreciate that.
I think she's had probably two.
I have had several, so we are good today. But we are really excited for the guest that we have today, blue hair and all. It is absolutely fantastic to have another Texan on the webinar with us today. So we have myself and of course Stu. And Steve, I am going to let you introduce yourself. The man, the myth, the legend at Wi-Fi Janitor on Twitter, if you guys don't know him, Steve Rodriguez.
Yep, Steve Rodriguez, Enterprise Wireless Architect for CDW, covering the South Central region. So it'll
fantastic. Be fun. Yeah, and so Steve, one of the things that I've been able to know you for a little while now, you are one of the smartest people I know. So we're really excited to have you. So,
thank you.
Heart for Steve. All right. But before we jump into our topic, as you guys know, you may not know, but we on Wi-Fi Day started doing some polls. And so we're going to start incorporating those into our webinars. And so I am going to go ahead and launch our first poll today because, we wanted to find out some questions. So how often do you optimize or validate your network to make sure it continues to meet your requirements? So we'll let that, isn't that a good question? Because you know what? We are going to be talking about something today that just might be related. What do you think?
I think so.
But before we also do that, Stu kind of talked about the set it and forget it. Steve, I want to hear your best Ron Popeil impersonation, the set it and forget it. Let's see. We'll start with Stu. We'll put him on the spot first.
Oh my goodness. You know what? Let me get into
get your radio
now.
voice.
Get
radio voice. Yeah.
All right, folks. Not only do we just put it in the oven, we set it and forget it.
That's good. Good job. Good job, Steve. All right, Steve, you're up.
See, I was always more of a fan of when he's looking out to the crowd and goes, "All right, everybody, what do? We just set it and
forget it."
Awesome.
There we go.
Well, and so how does that relate to wireless? The reality is that Wi-Fi needs tweaking. Wi-Fi needs optimization. It needs monitoring. It needs management. It needs a lot of things, right? And so we have to fine-tune our network on a regular basis, on a continual basis. Oops. So who's using the devices? Steve, I'm going to let you kind of share with us some of your thoughts.
So like when we start talking about what makes Wi-Fi needy, you actually have to go back to the old, or for me, I say go back to the old journalistic thing of who, the 5 W's, who, what, where, when, why, and of course, how. So why is Wi-Fi needy? Wi-Fi is needy because it's a contention-based media, right? Mm-hmm. One of my favorite things I ever heard was half duplex breathable media. So when we start getting into it, you have to look, who's using the device? And if you think that doesn't matter, you crazy. If your CEO or one of your C-levels makes a complaint, guaranteed that ticket hits a top priority over a guest. But who is using the device? Is it your C-level? Is it a guest? Are we using developers? And then this rolls into what I do next. What devices are being used? How many spatial streams do you have? Are they dual band? Are they 2.4 gig only? What types of devices are there? You look at Android devices, there are high-end Android devices, middle Android devices, and low-end Android devices. And they all act differently. Pulls you into your where. Where are these devices being used? Is it a school? Is it a warehouse area? Is it an office space? Is it an open office space where you have the low cubes where you can easily come in and collaborate in different areas? Fun question here. Why are we using wireless?
That's a good question.
So, if you're going to go with why, yeah, and the why is kind of where we tie into what the requirements are. right? So who and the what and the where and why, we can start to define our requirements. So what are we going to do in this area? What are we going to do in this area? Do we need high density? Can we just get away with a regular deployment where it doesn't have to be as dense? Or heck, is it a large public venue and you are extremely dense? All of that pulls into those requirements and understanding that.
Well, and I think that's, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, and I think that's one of the things that makes it so challenging, is because there's so many different things that go into the requirements. That's why you have to continually monitor it, because as we'll talk about in a little bit, things change and you have to understand what the needs are, where you're going, what the business purposes are, why you're doing it, who, as all of the things that you're talking about. That's one of the reasons why it requires maintenance and monitoring and management.
Oh, absolutely. Because the where devices are being used changes, and that changes your requirements. The why we're using devices change. I mean, you could start off with, we started off with wireless. The wireless why in the beginning was convenience. And then it became, we want to be able to move around and collaborate. Well, maybe one person brought their laptop in the beginning of that. Now we're bringing more people are coming in, and then, kind of like people say, there's no such thing as the paperless office. They do exist. The all wireless office does exist, and having those requirements is what, and checking those requirements is what keeps a network running. It's what keeps you from getting support tickets. Which, I spent time in TAC, and I know I didn't want those.
I was just going to say, that was your days back in TAC, right? I'm sure I called you a couple of times.
Probably.
Yeah.
And then, finally we get into how can we make the experience better? And of course, not take a bunch of tickets for it not working. And that how is, there's a theme that'll come up that you'll notice in like the next couple of slides, where we kind of went over, and it's like, talk to the users, review, refine requirements.
Shh, don't tell all the secrets now.
That's not a secret. It shouldn't be a secret anyway. But that's part of the how. How do we make it better? What do we need to do to keep the network running properly? I'm going to air quote properly. For what our current requirements are.
Absolutely.
And that ends up being the trick.
Well, and it sounds, when you start to talk about, listening to the things that you're describing, what, where, who, how, all of that is part of design. All of that is part of your planning process, but it's also still part of the management and the optimization process. It's not anything that we can forget. And that's the whole concept. We can't just, all right, my design is done. There's your network and I'm done and I'm out. It requires so many additional things. And I think the other thing to recognize is, just because you have a design that you think is perfect, things are going to change. No matter how many contingencies you plan for, something is going to happen. Something is going to change. Something is going to impact your network. It can be any number of things, a new application. One of the things, contact tracing, all of a sudden, they want contact tracing and application to be able to utilize on the network, but you didn't design for that. That's a change. It's something different, right? Physical environment. Steve, what has your experience been with physical environments changing in networks?
It's not a if, it's a when.
Yeah.
Remodels will always happen. Especially as the needs of the office change and evolve. So you'll go from having, this big room with a bunch of 6 or 8 foot tall cubicles, to those cubicles going away, and to, God forbid, an open office model where you have the low cubes and that, that hum of noises there. Or a complete remodel where they add offices around the edge of the building and put a big conference room in the center. There's always some sort of disruption that can happen in that office space that's going to change your requirements, change your needs.
Absolutely. Stu, we know that APs are smart. So what happens when your AP starts adjusting channel or power level?
Well,
how is that going to impact?
Well, it's definitely impact because I mean, you know, the environment changes. APs are going to start learning that said, hey, well, you know, in some certain vendors, they'll say, hey,
Mm-hmm.
you know what, I've got too much of a client load. Maybe I'll start to force clients to push off to another one. Or, you know, you go back to where Steve was mentioning on that physical environment, that actually brought a kind of a cool thing is that, you know what, when physical environments change, you know, you got to kind of figure out, well, is the AP in the right position now? Does the AP
Mm-hmm.
have to work harder to get around that wall that you've just created? Now you have to understand, okay, maybe I can't move the AP for some physical reason because there's nothing I can attach it to.
Mm-hmm.
Or do I adjust and change the power? And sometimes APs aren't smart enough. I think Steve and we probably found that sometimes a client just doesn't want to roam to that AP, right? Maybe it doesn't matter how long you put it up. Maybe you have to get it positioned better, right?
Yeah,
From
absolutely.
that physical place.
What about increased traffic? Different devices. What do you think there, Steve?
I don't think that ever happens. I mean,
Never, right? Never
Right.
it's
once
a rumor.
did traffic increase, decrease, or different devices came onto the network. It's exactly the way it was when you started, right?
Every single time, every day, of course. No, I mean, and again, though, in this day and age, you know, phones change every year. People change their phone every year, maybe 2 years at the most, but every year, pretty much. Your tablet changes, your laptop changes, and that refresh cycle coming through does completely disrupt what the norm is.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate saying, you know, the new normal, but the new normal with wireless does change
Mm-hmm.
every probably 6 months with what devices are coming in and hitting on the network.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, you talk about the new normal, right? Business needs change. We went from an environment where a lot of us were, you know, working in offices, and now we're in an environment where everyone's working remotely, everyone's working from home. Our office is going to reopen. Are they going to reopen at less capacity? What's going to happen? Your business need is going to change regardless, right? And I think that's something that we always need to remember is just being able to be flexible and accommodate that. But before we move on, I want to share the results of the poll. So it's really interesting. It was pretty split that between monthly, quarterly, and not at all. So that one actually surprised me
Yeah, it does.
to see that. So that's quite surprising. So we may do some digging into that here
on the next
here
couple
later.
slides,
But yeah.
I'm actually not surprised by. I'm a little surprised it's evenly spread that
Mm-hmm.
way. I'm a little surprised that not at all wasn't higher.
Really? Why is that?
Just from, so like I said, I'm on the partner side, right? I
Mm-hmm.
work with customers. A lot of customers I work with don't have
Mm-hmm.
people with a lot of wireless experience.
Mm-hmm.
So having the teams to come
That's
through
fair.
and do their own surveys and having the teams to come through and do that,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Yeah.
they don't literally have that knowledge in house, so they're having to go offload and offsite and pay for it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I
And
mean, I'm glad more people are getting it.
yeah, and Samantha, to your point, you're right. Some people do just do some designs and they don't do the management side. So absolutely, that's something to take into account.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that things will change, you know, ongoing measurement, what do you have to do with it? Why does that matter, right? Steve, why does it matter?
It matters because we don't want to take cases. We want our wireless to, we want it to, you know,
Mm-hmm.
we want it to work. We want to set it and forget it, or we want it to at least look at that way to the end users. But how do we know when our network's not working properly?
Mm-hmm.
Do we, you know, are we reactive and we work off of a ticket coming in, or are we proactive and we talk to the users?
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully we're reactive. I mean, you don't got to do something daily, but you got to, you know, have a, you know, cadence with certain people once a month or once a quarter and be like, hey, what's going on? And make sure it's out there working properly, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and get out there and walk the network and test it in different places.
Mm-hmm.
Which, you know, then comes into, we're going to review and refine those requirements because they, you know, have they changed? Did we actually get notice that that remodel's coming and we can plan for it early, you know, beforehand? Or are we going to be last minute trying to do it because, oh yeah, this building got remodeled last week and we're going to tell you about it now?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. A lot of comments surrounding, the difference between network owners and partners and all of that. There really is a distinction and delineation between the two, because partners understand you have to continue to tweak and manage and fine tune and optimize that. The different side, network owners still have that same desire, but maybe there's budgetary constraints that they can't have folks come out again, or, there's a lot of other factors that can impact that. And so one of the things that's really critical is being able to have the tools that you need to do some of those things, and a word from our sponsor here. But Ekahau does have some fantastic tools that allow you to do that. And that's one of the things we really believe in here is our tool can help, Ekahau Connect can help partners, it can help end users, it can help network owners really and truly manage and optimize, not necessarily, not monitoring it, but help you in that process of optimizing and managing and making sure your network is continuing to meet the requirements that you have.
And if I may also add, I think on this is really key, as Steve was highlighting, and we were highlighting, is talking to the users, is figuring out. Now, in the comments there, it was made is that, everything might be working from their point of view. That's true. And I've been on that side of the fence too, but it's always the certain users that are the power users that know that, hey, you know what? It's taking way too long to transfer this file today. I've got a development file. I'm working on some media, some video projects. Why is it slow, right? We need to figure it out. What is happening? Is there a huge contention? Is there some people say, oh, it looks fine to me. I take my phone out of my pocket. Looks great. But then to that user, that's power user, who's heavily relying on that video call or working on the latest game, right? He's trying to push it back up to his server. And I've seen this. They try to look at it and it's like, okay, great. Now he's taking up all the bandwidth. And that leaves out a couple of the other developers out of it. And then we have to work accommodating, right? Analyzing those trends. And it is there. I think it's just understanding how to interpret that data. And it's knowing about the information that you don't know, right? Capturing that information.
Yep. So true story. I was at a customer site, this was probably about 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more. And I'm sitting there walking around with my laptop, my phone, doing some speed tests. I wasn't doing anything with, anything spiffy with Ekahau or iPerf. I literally just pulled my Mac out, ran the airport command to see what my RSSI values were. I was streaming some audio from one of the websites where it didn't buffer, and I can't remember which one it was now. Just technically, everything seems to be fine. And again, like my perspective, everything was fine. And then we started talking to the developers. And the developers were like, yeah, no, the wireless is horrible. It's really slow. And we really got in there, and I'm talking to the guy and I'm looking at his setup, and he's got, laptop on a dock, 2 monitors. It's beautiful. AP's right there. I'm like, the AP is like literally like 10 feet away. You should be having a great signal. He goes, well, no, look at this. It's horrible. And I looked down and actually looked at his setup. Laptop lid was closed. I opened the laptop lid, which reoriented, the antennas on it.
The antennas,
and
right?
Oh my God, the network was so much better and so much faster.
Because that was the designed intention of a notebook, is to have the antennas in the screen pointing up.
But the intent for the customer was they want to be docked. They don't want to have their laptop lid up. So as I'm coming in behind the fact, trying to look at this, trying to help. Now I have that as my design requirement for them, is that they're gonna have their laptop lid closed, which changed my AP placements. It changed my densities for that one simple thing. And I actually did try and tell them, I was like, this is gonna cause you to have like some more APs. And they're like, yeah, but these guys make us money, so they're gonna get what they want.
And that's
which also goes back to that first question of who.
Yeah. And defining those requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we're getting a lot of questions, how do you help customers see that? The reality is what is the cost? So for those of you who participated in Wi-Fi Day, Sam Clements did a talk and had a great graphic that he showed the risk and the cost, associated. It's one of those things, you have to be able to determine how important wireless is to you. And so Cisco had done a study, probably 5 years ago about the cost and downtime of your network, of what happens. Because the reality is, in 95% plus of businesses, if the wireless goes down, business stops. It's critical, right?
It's
and so
like electricity, right?
absolutely,
Wi-Fi is like electricity.
it is, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so I think the cost, Cisco had reported in this study that the average cost for large businesses for downtime in the internet was like $680,000 plus an hour. For medium businesses, it was ranging around $200,000. Smaller businesses, obviously, it was less. But those are critical numbers. I mean, imagine what happens if your network is down for 2 hours. That's more than $1 million of business that you're losing, that you're missing out on. And it's being able to compare the ROI and the cost analysis with your customers, and why having these tools and having the ability and bringing, partners back on site to do things, or if you're a network owner yourself, why it's important to have the tool to be able to optimize and continually manage it yourself, because that cost is so critical. That risk is so high to your business that it's kind of a no-brainer in a lot of situations, I think.
Well, think about if your business is distribution of widgets, and the wireless is down, and so the people that are picking the product using the vote collect devices, the scanners, your Wi-Fi is not working, your products are not getting shipped, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not working. And so the ongoing measurement, so what do you do about it? Like, what's the plan of action? How do you take the things that are changing? So what happens when that environment changes, or what happens for, I remember I was working with a customer, and they were beautiful design, fully executed in all the retail stores throughout the United States. And about 15 to 20 stores kept talking about how they were having challenges and frustrations. Well, it turns out the store managers, they had a new campaign that they were launching, put these huge metal signs right in front of the AP. It's a great design, right? So it's that everything was going down on that side of the store. They couldn't get connectivity between to the next AP. And so I think it's, what do you do about it? What's the plan of action, right? So focusing on that, once again, Steve, to your point, talking to
the users.
And so let's talk through these.
I think we just,
okay.
Well, we'll pull them all up there. Yeah, let's get them on the screen, right? Yeah. Talking to users.
It's huge. I mean, how do you know, if you don't know what the problem is, you can't fix it. If you don't know there's a problem, you can't fix it. And you need to, again, we want to be proactive with this. We don't want to be, doing something at the last minute when we could have been doing something a week before. We can. So, and again, refine the requirements. Why? Because they change. Notice that how that when is in green. It's not if the requirements are going to change, it's when the requirements change.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And then, how do we get money to pay for this stuff? We talk to leadership. We brief leadership on what's coming. And again, this is not something, proactively, we want to be talking to management about what our budget is. What can we get to do? How much money can we get to do this? Because if we're asking them at the last minute, or we're going back to them multiple times, the likelihood of us getting that money to do something goes down.
Absolutely. And then also, you actually have to do the work at the end, right? You have to put it together. You have to execute on the things that you're doing, right? And so, Stu and I, the other day, we were having a conversation. We were joking about, with social media, or excuse me, social distancing coming in. Man, slipped the tongue today. I'm tired. But with social distancing and everything that we have, wouldn't it be great if now there was an application that, you're getting too close to someone, so it starts beeping on your device? too much talking time.
That's right. Yeah, too much, right? It's there's technology now that I think we've learned this week is there's technology now that says, you know what, can alert you on the phone. It says, oh, by the way, Tawny, you know what, we've been talking too much. We got to step away now. We're at our time. That's actually kind of cool because if I'm standing there talking to someone, I get a little ding. Oh, time's up. Got to go. Social distance. And so the technology is becoming very important nowadays is where Wi-Fi is going to start understanding our patterns and whatnot. We've been doing it for years, but now we're actually really getting into it, right? Understanding contact tracing. I think we've learned that even from Wi-Fi Day.
Yeah, actually putting that stuff in place versus just the standard red card, yellow card.
Right? Yeah. That's yeah, for the soccer fans out there.
I was going more letter Kenny, but all right.
Yeah. Actually. But you know what? I think those are key points. And for the takeaway here is talking to users and getting that firsthand information instead of the anecdotal. Steve, you and I have probably sat on this many times where we have just heard from, you know, looking at a ticket is that, well, the user might, I think they're experiencing this. And it's like, can I just talk to the person in the warehouse? And I say, oh, got it. Now I understand what's happening. Or you have to physically, visually see what the device is doing, right? So understanding, because then you can better triage what to look for.
Absolutely.
So speaking of triage, I have another poll question.
Oh, did I segue that in? Just
you did, and you didn't even know it, Stu.
I didn't even know it.
All right. So how often do you have interferences on your network? It's going to happen at some point, right? How
Absolutely.
often? And so my question then becomes, if we know from previous poll question, if folks aren't optimizing and managing, what are they doing? If they have interferences, are they letting them go? What are they doing with them to manage that, to identify? So we'll look at what the response is here in just a second. But a daily poll option, yes.
Yeah, I guess we should put that
some networks
hourly by the minute, if not by the second.
Sorry, I my fail today. But you know, that's the reality is there are a lot of interferences. So I'm going to share the results and we're going to talk about that for just a minute. But we recall from the previous that the majority said they're optimizing and managing their network, you know, tweaking that either annually or not at all. But what we're seeing here is that the majority of folks are having weekly interferences. So how do you take that and use the tools to identify interferences? Right.
And there is a distinction, like someone is saying, ones I can, like Michael Lund said, ones I can ignore or ones I have to deal with. There is always some interference out there that is you're not having to deal with, and it'll be classified interference because it's still detectable energy in the medium. Yeah, you're right. You can ignore those, but knowing you have that having that information and knowing it's there can give you that anecdotal information of, we had an issue. When an issue happens, did something change? If you're not monitoring, you can't know that it changed.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, Peter shares a story that he had done some work in a bingo hall. I don't know if you recall that story.
Oh, that was fun.
But the manufacturer of the tablets that they were using in the bingo hall, they were having a lot of interference. It wasn't working. What happened was the AP or the tablet manufacturer was out, I think it was 30 plus days, 3 months, you know, they were working on it for a significantly long time. They call Peter in, he fires up his Ekahau analyzer, uses his sidekick and looks at it and then says, oh, it's a microwave. And the guy just unplugs the microwave and throws it away, right? But it's there are interferences that are going to significantly impact performance. And we have to make sure as, you know, wireless professionals that we are looking for those interferences and have a plan to be able to capture those and to manage that.
And just to add, it's understanding what's within your control, right? What you can control to mitigate those things, and then understanding what you can't control, and then how do you program your access points to avoid said channels, like DFS. You know, sometimes it doesn't act, or maybe you have constant industrial microwaves, commercial microwaves that constantly are on, right? And so then you have to augment. And so
Mm-hmm.
And those things are often very like quick. Sometimes, like Steve, I mean, seeing like DFS events and microwaves, sometimes they're like blips. Sometimes they don't register. Sometimes they register on the APs, and sometimes they don't. And
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
it depends on the manufacturer
and how bad the interference is. Like modern, like everyone. I always love how everyone says microwaves, because that is the traditional thing. But it's a misbehaving microwave. It's one where the shielding is usually folding, or it's an industrial where it's like massively overpowered.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully you would look around and catch that one. But if you have to know it's there. And how do you know it's there? You capture data, you get data. You have to go look. I mean, I don't want to say that. Actually, I'll say the name Cognio, if anybody remembers that. Or I remember years ago hearing a story from Jim Florwick, where he was out working, and knowing your area, like every day at a certain time, this one section of a building would drop their wireless, and they couldn't figure out why. Like 2.4 was unusable for like 30 minutes of
Mm-hmm.
every day, and I mean, it was consistent, and they couldn't figure it out. So interesting question. Do you know what MCI stands for? Or do you remember MCI?
No.
Are you going to make me Google it now? I have to remember
No.
what that means now.
MCI is a telecom company.
Well, that's what I thought it was, but I thought you were going with a different acronym, because.
Oh, no. This is them. But MCI stood for Microwave Communications International.
Oh, how funny.
Very close to that. So when they were out there, this company building was near a MCI tower. So when they would transmit, they were transmitting microwave signal that was just it was just blowing up the wireless network in the area.
Interesting.
But again, it's like, if you don't know it's there, if you're not monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
Well, interesting fact, because microwaves actually play a part. So those old big microwaves on those towers are powerful enough to rotisserie your chicken. I'm just putting it there. It is true. I have seen that done. Hanging out on a big pole in front of the big old microwave towers.
Yep. When they key up, it'll go.
Yep.
Stu, that made me smile today. Thanks. So Steve, question in the Q&A: what are potential causes of users randomly losing Wi-Fi connectivity completely, but others don't have that same problem on the same AP? And how? So we'll tackle that first part. So what are the potential causes of users randomly losing Wi-Fi connectivity completely, but others on the same AP don't?
I'm going to qualify that. You do say same Windows model machines. Check your wireless drivers. So one of the fun things with wireless is, even if it's embedded, when you do Windows updates, 99% of the time you are not updating the Windows driver. Or not the Windows driver, excuse me, the wireless NICS driver. So if you have Intel, you need to go to Intel's website, pull their package, write your MSI and push, or have your users do it. Or go to whichever that vendor is and update the driver, because you're updating Windows, you're patched there, but drivers don't always get that update, and that'll usually fix 95 to 98% of your issues right there. Get the right driver on the device.
And we could usually see that actually by we can even leverage capture, right? We could even leverage capturing those PCAPs to kind of understand that. And that's something that, insert product placement here as a sidekick can actually do that with our capture utility. And that is actually kind of help understand that roaming between APs, right? Understanding, is that client actually coming on board?
Yeah, absolutely. Another question coming in, Steve, and I'm just going to ask Steve because, that's we get to do that. We get to use Steve today. How do you optimize roaming for devices on your network?
Yes.
Roaming is a big question.
Yay.
Yeah.
Roaming is a big question, and I'm going to go ahead and quote Sam Clements. It depends.
Ding, ding, ding.
Had to get that out there. When you're optimizing roaming, so what you get into is, again, it goes something to what are our devices? Are they iPhones, or are they, what's the majority of our devices? And designed to the lowest spec device on the network.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I mean, don't one-off that like, oh, I have one Android tablet that we use that is, or one Chromebook that's a single spatial stream device.
Mm-hmm.
If you have that, if most of it's two spatial stream designed towards that and what their specs are, most vendors will put out ideals, right? So we know, like
Mm-hmm.
with voice, we know like a Vocera badge wants to be at this RSSI and this SNR, and a Cisco phone wants this one, and oh god, what was the other one we used to use all the time?
SpectraLink.
Oh yeah, SpectraLink, that's a good one. They all have different requirements. They're similar, but they have different requirements. So you designed that, and then you have to keep checking. For optimized roaming becomes really interesting with, again, how old is the device? Do we support .11k, VW, R, etc.? So can we help influence that, or are we playing other games? Like with Cisco controllers, you can play games where I can set a noise level. I can so when if energy is below neg 76 dBm, it's I could demodulate and do that, or I'll just consider that noise to try and force the client to go to an AP because I'm not responding to it. There's various ways to get to optimize roaming, and if you ask Stu that question, you're going to get a different answer. If you ask Sam, you'll get a slightly different answer. If you ask JD, you're going to get a slightly different answer between the best ways.
I think, one of the things that if I recall from various conferences and training is your design should be for your least capable, most important device. And so understanding what the roaming criteria is for that, making sure that your network meets that minimum qualification. If it's a handheld picker or scanner in a warehouse, if it's a telemetry machine in a hospital facility, whatever it is, it's designed for the requirements for your most important, least capable device. And because the device, roaming decisions happen at the client. So understanding that, making sure that your network meets that requirement need and is a great place to start, I think, as well.
Absolutely.
Well, it's trying to influence clients too, right? I mean, there are some things that we can do from certain AP vendors to influence the roaming, right? To help us make that decision.
So speaking of some optimization for roaming capabilities, what about having high channel utilization even though there are no clients on the AP?
Yeah,
that's a loaded one, isn't it?
It is. That's why I asked it.
That's a good one. Yeah, Gregory, that's a good one.
That is a great question.
If you're having a high channel utilization, even though there's no clients on the AP, you got spectrum issues, man.
Yes.
That is absolutely, break out the sidekick, start looking for what the interfere, in the spectrum side, start looking for what that device is.
Absolutely.
Just you have to find that interferer and get rid of it, and and actually, let's say, find that interferer and hope it's something you can get rid of.
And also, actually, a friend of ours, all of ours, is Mr. Stefanik. High channel utilization is the blood pressure of your network, right? If that is super high, and right, Steve, you have to break out the spectrum analyzer. How would you know? You see channel hidings, but no clients are on it. There's no AP. Like, what's going on? You have to figure out, I can see it's a device that's misbehaving, causing something. It's a DC motor from a refrigerator, believe it or not, that's actually creating that interference. People are thinking, so we talked about, it's not only a microwave. It could be an off, the magneto's off, right? And it's creating a distortion field. Wow, I'm sounding like Star Trek. Can I get a Star Trek reference for every? But it's true. There's something in there, right? So that's where looking at the spec an and seeing how fast it is, and when you look at it from a sidekick point of view, it's like that sidekick's looking at it at lightning speed, right, to see what's happening.
Yep.
So Stu, I'm gonna ask this question of you really quick. So John writes to us, and I say writes to us, but it posed the question. They're using smart policy to manage power, min and max power, and channel use on 2, 4, and 5. How do you determine if other business AP interference is causing the lag between your handheld scanners and your AP?
So like that outside interference, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's what he's talking about. You know what? This
Mm-hmm.
is a common thing, and this is everywhere. I think it's the thing is that, and I know Steve, you could probably add is there's stuff that we care about at
Mm-hmm.
a certain level of our society that's coming in, and there's the stuff that we don't care about, which
Mm-hmm.
goes to the threshold. When we look at is it on our floor? Is it near our clients? Is it causing disturbance, like somebody's personal hotspot? Is it the next door? Maybe you're sharing, office sharing, and like there are many of those offices out there that do that. You have to understand how is it going to have an impact on you. Maybe it's maybe you may have smart Wi-Fi RF policy to manage your own power, but you can't manage the other person's power. It's beyond your control.
Mm-hmm.
But at least maybe you can go over there and help them if you can, because maybe they're on channel 4 and you're on channels 1 and 6, and they're killing both of your APs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're not playing nice, right? Would you agree, Steve? I think that we're on that lines of
Mm-hmm.
channel playing, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If a neighboring business is causing you that issue, um, grab a box of donuts, grab a thing of coffee, and go over and talk to talk to their network guy and be like, hey, let's talk about the wireless.
Mm-hmm.
I'm catching interference from you, and and don't be accusatory. I mean, you can be if you want to be that aggressive. It's like, hey, I've been seeing some interference on
Mm-hmm.
my APs, or I want to make sure I'm not interfering with you. I'm over here to help you out with this,
Mm-hmm.
and just get in there. And like Stu said, do you need some help? Do you would like for me to help you with this, and we'll see if we can tune this. And then, you can't do anything. I always like auto planning, but in an area like that, you might get somewhere where you hard set the APs that are nearest the edge so that, they're on channel 149 and you're on channel 56, just so that
Mm-hmm.
you push away.
Fantastic. I think neighboring interferences is something that is a challenge for everybody because it's beyond your control. And so what do you do, Steve? That's a, honestly, great recommendation, depending on if they like donuts or,
and that's where
coffee
you
or
can
Dr. Pepper.
That's right. You can throw up the analyzer, right?
Yeah. Throw it up and take a look.
We
So
should
what
actually throw a picture of that. Insert product placement. I'm sorry, Tawny, go ahead.
No. Lots of questions about channel utilization. So Steve, what percentage determines high channel utilization or unusable channel utilization? What do you think? The person is proposing 50 to 60%, but in your opinion, in your experience?
It depends. If you're going for voice, and I want my network to be at try to get like about 40% utilization if I'm pushing voice, or voice video. If it's just a data network and I'm just looking to randomly send email and stream YouTube and check Facebook, I could probably handle 50 to 60, but I'd still want to work it and get it down if I could.
Fantastic. So one of the other things that I wanted to make sure that we touch on, remembering the concept of set it and forget it, right? We can see here how many different things, the conversations in the chat, how many different things are impacting our networks all the time. It's critical that we're able to tweak that. Steve, your thoughts on just optimization and management of your network on a continual basis?
Needs to be done. It should absolutely, just like just like you go to the doctor every year and get checked on, right? And you have that baseline, you need to do the same thing with the wireless. You need to be checking probably quarterly, if not, just walk around and check the network quarterly. You don't have to do a full-on survey, but go spot check areas, especially areas where a lot of users tend to congregate and work. Go spot check those areas, go check them out. And if you find an issue, of course, spread out and do more to get down in there. But every little bit helps. If you're checking it, if you're monitoring it, if you're talk to the users to see what issues if they've been having issues, or what their thoughts on it are. You're going to be able to stay ahead of that curve and hopefully find an issue and fix it before the CEO has an issue and there's a bunch of screaming and yelling.
Stu, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's, oh, sorry, I was answering a question in the Q&A, but yes, I think it's, yeah, you shouldn't be setting it and forgetting it, because it's really key is things will always change, and you have to understand that no environment is ever going to be perfect. We're dealing with a shared spectrum, it's radios, and we want to make sure that we've set it, but we want it to always be learning. We always want to be knowing what's going on, right? And so there's some key things that is making sure that we go out and do a validation survey to understand that post-analysis. Figure out, hey, is this still going pretty good? Let's do a quick check. We're going to increase capacity. We heard from HR today that we're hiring 20 new people for this area. 20, what are they doing? Developers? Oh, got it. We know what they do. Shift the model, right? We may need to augment the wireless infrastructure. Get into, and part of those things that will change is get as an IT professional, when you're at your companies or businesses, work with your office manager, understand things that are coming, because that will help you void those tickets later on. You're knowing from the office manager, so make friends with the office manager, he or she, buy them coffee, have them breakfast, and and then say, hey, you know what's happening? Oh, well, you know what, we're going to be planning. We think we're going to be having some new people. Oh, great. How many? Interesting. What area? You know what? I think we might need to look at the Wi-Fi, not only the network jacks, and that comes back into requirements. And then you create a plan for action.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, it's always all about the requirements. And when you're understanding what your need is, things change, obviously. But you have to have tools to do it. Carpenters have tools, and instructors have tools that they're teaching in the classroom. Everyone has tools, and you have to have tools to manage it. I'm a little biased, but Ekahau has the best tools to be able to do the things that we need to do to manage to optimize between capture, survey, the sidekick, and analyzer, to be able to capture the interferers, to see what's happening, insight into your network, utilizing Ekahau Pro to be able to manage and gain that insight is critical. And as wireless professionals, we all need tools to be able to do that. Excuse me. That being said, Steve, our stand-up philosopher here, is more than happy to answer any questions that come his way on Twitter. So please feel free to reach out to Steve at Wi-Fi Janitor on Twitter. Of course, myself or Stu. But Steve, any last thoughts that you want to share with us?
Sorry, much like Stu was answering a question. The importance of this is keeping the network running. And like I said before, there's a lot of companies that don't have a dedicated wireless guy, or they don't have a wireless person. I'll be mostly PC. They don't have a dedicated wireless person. But so there's one person from the networking team that's starting, that's got the responsibility. Get budget for training if you can. Build the business case for getting, at the Ekahau suite of products, so that you can test, you can do this, and then you're not having to go to a partner or a VAR as every 3 months to get, when something comes up. You can do this spot check yourself. The ROI on that can be, the math can be done to prove ROI of having a wireless engineer, an engineer trained to be a wireless engineer, to monitor and check the network to keep it running so that we don't have issues.
Absolutely. And as we end here, I'm going to have Stu is going to fire up the Ekahau analyzer to kind of look at, to see we're going to look at Stu's environment in his home. So I'm going to stop sharing so he can do that. But that, I think, is what is really important. Why my button doesn't want to work? There we go. So that Stu can share that with us, because it's really critical to be able to use the tools and see what we have available.
So right here, you should be seeing this is actually probably Steve's and I's favorite views as a spec an. And what you're seeing here is just kind of an active environment on our analyzer app of the spectrum analysis is happening in 2.4 right now. And if we wanted to look a little bit deeper, and we're leveraging the sidekick for this information, is I can understand is, okay, now I'm looking at this. Maybe I want to go and check out my channel quality and focus on that 2.4 gigahertz, understand, look at this. Okay, so we got some A lot of SSIDs that may be on there, right? You can see what's happening on channel 1 and look down on channel 11. And this is actually picking up from outside of my office, like my home, right? The surrounding areas, right?
And Stu is using, just to clarify, Stu is using our Analyzer app and the Sidekick to display that information on the iPad.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, I should have introduced that as a little more of a better lead in. Yes. So here, folks, here is the Analyzer app. This is an iOS-based app. I'm actually looking at this right on my iPad at the moment. I can definitely look at my signal strength, and we're reading my access points here. And I'm actually seeing, okay, great. I can see the vendor, the RSSI minus 32. That's great, right? Well, SNR of 60. How can you? That's great. Well, it as also happens is behind my head here, but I can see my SSIDs in play, and then I would like to kind of see who else is in that environment, right? From 2, 4, and 5, and what are my APs? My SNR channel quality, what we were talking about there a little earlier, but then of course our connectivity, we can actually look at it even on our roaming algorithm. So as we're watching the iPad walk around, we can actually walk around with a Sidekick and see how we're roaming, right? To get in there, which is actually quite slick. But that spectrum thing is I'm going to do a quick test here. And we talked about channel quality, and Steve, you'll probably say as we look at that channel utilization and watch that channel utilization climb, right? And so as we're seeing that climb right now, where I'm actually simulating the data, we're actually using a speed test from one of our parent companies, Ookla, who makes a speed test. We got it almost to 98%. And I'm not too sure if the actual transmission kind of skipped a beat there on it, but it is right there. But what does that look like? As you can see, that's pretty high-end traffic, right? Because that's where it's like, is it a concern for me, right? Is something, and I'll generate that again, is that a huge concern for me? Is that something I need to be worried about? Maybe. Is it causing an impact? Is my AP handling it? Possibly. Then I would go directly into that spectrum view, and I would say, okay, here we go. So there's that traffic happening. You can see it getting red, and as the black actually comes out on the bottom, it's really data intensive, right?
Yeah. And just to share one quick insight, folks, a lot of people have been asking Android for Analyzer. Back in February when we launched Analyzer, we said it's coming. It is coming soon. So yes, that is on the roadmap and will be to your Android device soon.
Soon, yes. I really want to give a date, but I can't.
No, Stu.
Because I don't have one.
Stu,
I'm telling you the truth. I don't.
We're amongst friends.
We're amongst friends.
Secrets.
Yes, that's right.
All right.
But for sure.
That's awesome.
And with that, Steve,
stop
absolutely thank you for joining us today. It's fantastic to hear your perspective. And of course, Stu, as always, great teamwork.
Excellent. Thank you, folks, for staying on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And seeing the little quick show and tell at the end there, as we were talking about, is understanding that environment, right? And where it's key to understand and not to
set it
and forget it.
And with that, folks, you guys have a wonderful day or evening or beverage or whatever it is.
All right.